The morning alarms echoed through the massive space station as thousands of beings from across the galaxy prepared for the most watched event in recent history. Betting pools had formed in every corner of civilized space, with odds heavily stacked, against the single human representative who would face the ultimate test of biological superiority. Tom Richards adjusted his simple clothing and checked his basic equipment one final time. Unlike the other contestants who wore advanced environmental suits or carried specialized gear designed for their species, he had only the standard survival kit provided to all participants. Around him, representatives from 11 other species made their final preparations with considerably more fanfare. The Krillian delegate, a massive creature covered in thick armor plating, flexed muscles that could crush steel. Their species had evolved on a world where food was scarce and competition was deadly. They could survive for weeks without eating by slowing their metabolism to almost nothing. The betting crowds loved them as clear favorites. Near the preparation area, 3 Voltari floated in specialized chambers filled with their native gas mixture. These energy beings could absorb radiation directly from stars and convert it into sustenance. They had volunteered for the trial mainly to prove their superiority over what they called the primitive biological forms. Tom watched a group of Nexari performing complex rituals before entering their meditation pose. These plant-like beings could photosynthesize like Earth vegetation, but their advanced neural networks allowed them to optimize the process far beyond any simple plant. They were confident that 5 days under artificial suns would be easy for their kind. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering that had taken 3 years to construct. Spanning 50 square kilometers, it recreated the harshest environments from dozens of worlds. The surface appeared to be nothing but cracked earth, scattered rocks, and dead vegetation. The designers had specifically chosen this terrain because their surveys indicated it contained no viable nutrition sources for any known species. Dr. Felix, the chief organizer from the Science Coalition, addressed the gathered contestants through the Universal Translator System. His tentacled form writhed with excitement as he explained the rules one final time. No outside help would be provided. No communication with support teams was allowed. Contestants would be monitored but not assisted until they either completed the 5-day challenge or their vital signs indicated serious danger. As the countdown began, Tom noticed something that made him smile slightly. What the alien architects had dismissed as decorative dead plants were actually recognizable to his Earth-trained eyes. Scattered across the seemingly barren landscape were plants that looked remarkably similar to species he had learned about during wilderness survival. Training back on Earth, the energy barriers activated with a low humming sound, sealing all 12 contestants inside the arena. Immediately, the other species began implementing their survival strategies. The Krillians found shaded areas and began the process of entering their hibernation-like state. The Voltari spread themselves thin to maximize their surface area for energy absorption. The Nexari positioned themselves where the artificial suns would provide optimal lighting. Tom did something completely different. He began walking slowly across the arena floor, stopping frequently to examine what others saw as worthless debris. Where his competitors saw dried grass, he recognized seed heads that might still contain nutrition. Where they saw withered roots, he saw potential food sources that might extend deep underground. The first day passed with most contestants conserving energy according to their species-specific strategies. The observers in the viewing stations began commenting on how well their favorites were performing. The Krillians showed no signs of stress. The Voltari maintained steady energy levels. The Nexari appeared to be thriving under the artificial sunlight. Meanwhile, Tom had covered nearly a quarter of the arena, creating mental maps of where different types of vegetation were located. He found patches of what looked like wild onion grass, areas where small tubers might be growing beneath the surface, and clusters of seed-bearing plants that had been dismissed as completely dead by the arena designers. As the sun set on the first day, The viewing stations buzzed with commentary about how surprisingly well all contestants were doing. The experts had predicted that at least 2 or 3 species would show serious stress by now, but everyone seemed to be managing their resources effectively. Tom had spent his entire first day exploring and cataloging without consuming any significant food or water. This strategy puzzled the observers, who expected him to show the first signs of weakness. Humans, according to their biological profiles, required regular nutrition and had no specialized survival adaptations like the other species. Night fell across the arena, and Tom finally stopped his exploration to rest. He had identified over 30 different types of vegetation that showed potential for providing nutrition. Most importantly, he had found several areas where morning dew would likely collect, providing a possible water source that none of the arena designers had considered. The other contestants settled into their respective night routines. Some species required no sleep and continued their energy conservation methods. Others entered dormant states designed to minimize resource consumption. Tom simply found a comfortable spot near a cluster of what appeared to be completely dead shrubs and prepared for a normal night of rest. The viewing stations remained active through the night, with observers from hundreds of worlds watching their chosen champions. Betting continued around the clock, with most wagers still heavily favoring the specialized species over the apparently average human. As dawn approached on the second day, Tom was already awake and examining the dew collection. Patterns he had predicted. Small droplets of clean water had indeed formed on various plant surfaces throughout the night. While other contestants began their second day of careful energy management, Tom was already implementing active strategies for finding food and water, in an environment that everyone else considered completely barren. The real test was about to begin, and Tom knew that his success would depend not on having the most advanced biological adaptations, but on something far more fundamental. Humans had survived on Earth not because they were the strongest or most specialized, but because they could find opportunity and sustenance in places where other species saw only empty wasteland. The second day would reveal whether this ancient human skill would prove superior to millions of years of specialized evolutionary development. The second morning brought unexpected developments that had the observation decks buzzing with confused chatter. While most contestants continued their energy conservation strategies, several were already showing signs of strain that the scientists had not predicted would appear until day 3 or 4. Brix, the Krillian champion, had successfully entered the deep hibernation state that allowed his species to survive extended periods without food. However, the artificial environment was proving more challenging than expected. The temperature fluctuations and unfamiliar atmospheric composition were forcing his body to work harder to maintain the hibernation state, consuming energy reserves faster than planned. The 3 Voltari were experiencing similar unexpected difficulties. Their energy absorption systems were designed for natural stellar radiation, not the artificial lighting provided in the arena. The spectrum was close enough to keep them alive, but not optimal enough to fully sustain them. They were slowly consuming their internal energy reserves while maintaining the appearance of thriving. Tom had begun his second day before dawn, using the early morning light to examine his discoveries from the previous day more carefully. What he found exceeded his expectations. The seemingly dead vegetation was actually a complex ecosystem that had adapted to survive in harsh conditions by appearing lifeless to casual observation. The withered grass contained seeds with hard outer shells that protected nutritious contents. Tom had learned during survival training that many such seeds could be processed to extract proteins and carbohydrates. The key was knowing how to break down the protective barriers without destroying the nutrition inside. Near a cluster of rocks, he found what appeared to be completely dried root systems. However, when he carefully dug around them, he discovered that several inches below the surface, the roots were still alive and contained stored nutrients. These underground storage systems were invisible from the surface, but represented a significant food source for anyone who knew what to look for. The arena designers had unknowingly recreated conditions similar to environments where early humans had learned to survive during Earth's harshest periods. What looked like barren wasteland to species that had evolved specialized survival mechanisms was actually rich with opportunities for a generalist species that had learned to extract nutrition from seemingly impossible sources. Tom spent the morning carefully harvesting small amounts of various plant materials, taking care not to exhaust any single resource. He collected seed heads from dried grasses, tubers from buried root systems, and even some insects that were living in the ecosystem but had been overlooked by the arena designers who focused only on obvious food sources. By midday, while other contestants were rationing their energy or relying on their biological advantages, Tom was actually preparing what could reasonably be called a meal. He had found stones suitable for grinding seeds and had identified several plants whose leaves, though bitter, contained important vitamins and minerals. The observation stations were beginning to take notice of his activities. Dr. Felix found himself fielding questions from confused scientists who could not understand how the human was finding resources in an environment their surveys had declared completely barren. Meanwhile, the first signs of real trouble were appearing among the supposedly superior contestants. One of the Nexari, despite optimal positioning for photosynthesis, was showing energy fluctuations that indicated their advanced biological processes were consuming more resources than the artificial environment could provide. The insectoid Vithrak, delegate, whose species was famous for surviving in environments that would kill most other life forms, was discovering that their specialized digestive system was too efficient. They had evolved to extract every possible nutrient from minimal food sources, but in an environment with truly zero obvious food, even their remarkable adaptations were useless. Tom, unaware of the growing concern in the observation decks, was solving a different kind of problem. He had found a reliable food source, but water remained a challenge. The dew collection had provided some moisture, but not enough for sustained health over 5 days. His solution came from observing the ecosystem more carefully. Some of the plants he had initially dismissed as completely dead were actually surviving by collecting and storing microscopic amounts of atmospheric moisture. By carefully cutting into certain types of stems and roots, he could extract small but significant amounts of clean water. The process was slow and labor-intensive, but it worked. Tom was accessing a water source that existed within the ecosystem itself, invisible to anyone who had not learned to see plants as complex survival resources rather than simple decoration. As the second day progressed, the gap between Tom's situation and that of the other contestants began to widen dramatically. While they conserved energy and relied on their biological advantages, he was actively improving his position by exploiting resources that everyone else had overlooked. The betting pools throughout the galaxy were beginning to shift as news of the unexpected developments spread. The human, originally considered the weakest contestant by a significant margin, was somehow not only surviving but appearing to thrive while supposedly superior species showed increasing signs of stress. By evening of the second day, Tom had established a basic but sustainable routine. He had identified renewable food sources, solved the water problem, and even begun improving his shelter using materials readily available in the environment. His approach was completely different from every other contestant, focusing on active resource exploitation rather than passive conservation. The real shock came when the first contestant actually collapsed. Zeph, representing a species known for surviving in the vacuum of space, had calculated their energy reserves perfectly for a 5-day period of conservation. However, their calculations had not accounted for the stress of an unfamiliar environment and the energy required to maintain their specialized life support systems outside their native conditions. As medical teams rushed to extract Zeph from the arena, the observers began to realize that their understanding of survival might be fundamentally flawed. The most specialized species, those with the most advanced biological adaptations, were proving more vulnerable than expected. Meanwhile, the supposedly primitive human continued to find ways to turn apparent disadvantages into practical advantages. The arena, designed to be the ultimate test of biological superiority, was instead becoming a demonstration of a completely different kind of evolutionary success. The third day dawned with chaos in the observation stations as scientists scrambled to understand how their carefully calculated predictions were proving so completely wrong. 3 more contestants had been removed during the night, their specialized biological systems failing in ways that defied all previous research. The crystalline Silthari representative had been expected to last the full 5 days by absorbing minerals directly from the arena floor. Instead, their energy conversion systems had become overloaded, trying to process the unfamiliar mineral compositions. Their crystalline structure began showing stress fractures, forcing emergency extraction to prevent permanent damage. Tom woke to find himself in an environment that was increasingly working in his favor. The night had brought more dew than expected, and his collection systems had gathered enough water for the entire day. More importantly, his careful harvesting of renewable resources was allowing him to maintain and even improve his physical condition. He had discovered something that surprised even him. Several of the plant species in the arena were not just surviving, but actually thriving under the specific conditions created by the arena designers. The artificial lighting, the controlled atmosphere, and the mineral composition of the soil had created an environment where these hardy plants were producing more nutrition than they would in their native conditions. The morning brought Tom's first real interaction with another contestant. Gareth, the remaining Nexari, had abandoned his optimal photosynthesis position and was desperately searching the area where Tom had been active. The plant being's advanced neural networks had finally analyzed the situation enough to realize that the human was accessing resources that should not exist. Tom looked up from where he was processing seeds into a nutritious paste and saw Gareth's distress. Despite being in a competition, his human instincts toward cooperation kicked in. He offered to share his knowledge of which plants were actually edible and how to process them safely. Gareth's response revealed the fundamental difference in their approaches. The Nexari's biological systems were so specialized for photosynthesis that they could not process the plant materials Tom had identified as food. Their evolution toward perfect energy efficiency had eliminated their ability to digest anything other than pure light energy and basic minerals. This interaction was being watched by millions across the galaxy, and it highlighted something that the contest designers had not anticipated. The human was not just surviving through superior adaptations, but was actually capable of helping other species overcome their limitations. This cooperative instinct was being demonstrated in the middle of what was supposed to be a pure competition. The observation decks were now filled with urgent conferences as scientists tried to understand what they were witnessing. Dr. Felix found himself defending the arena design against accusations that it was somehow biased toward primitive species. The surveys had been thorough. The design committee had included representatives from multiple advanced species, and every calculation indicated that specialized biological systems should provide clear advantages. What they had not accounted for was the possibility that specialization itself might be a disadvantage in truly unfamiliar environments. The most advanced species had evolved to be perfectly efficient in their native conditions, but this efficiency came at the cost of adaptability. Tom spent the middle of the third day expanding his resource base. He had found a section of the arena where underground water sources created slightly different growing conditions. Here, different types of edible plants were thriving, providing him with nutritional variety that was improving his health rather than just maintaining it. He also made a discovery that changed his understanding of the entire arena. What he had initially thought were random clusters of different plant types were actually parts of a complex ecosystem. The plants supported each other through underground root networks, shared nutrient systems, and symbiotic relationships that the arena designers had not recognized. This ecosystem was not just surviving in the arena conditions, it was actually designed by millions of years of evolution to thrive in exactly these types of harsh, variable environments. The alien scientists had unknowingly created perfect conditions for a type of survival system that specialized in not being specialized. As the day progressed, more contestants were showing severe stress. The mighty Bricks had been forced to abandon hibernation as his energy reserves dropped to dangerous levels. The Voltari had dimmed significantly as their energy absorption proved inadequate for their metabolic needs. Most shocking was the condition of the Drakmari representative, whose species was legendary for surviving in conditions that would instantly kill most other life forms. Their biological systems were so efficient at extracting resources from hostile environments that they could theoretically survive on trace elements in vacuum. However, the arena contained almost no trace elements they could process, and their hyper-efficient systems were consuming themselves trying to find nutrition that matched their biochemistry. Tom, meanwhile, was thriving to such an extent that he had begun experimenting with food preservation. He was processing more nutrition than he could consume immediately and storing it using techniques that required no technology beyond basic knowledge of how different plant materials interacted with each other. The third evening brought the most significant development yet. Tom had not just survived 3 days in conditions designed to challenge any species, he had actually improved his situation to the point where he could probably survive for weeks if necessary. This was being accomplished, not through superior biological adaptations, but through something that the galactic scientific community was struggling to quantify. Tom was demonstrating a type of intelligence that could recognize complex patterns in unfamiliar environments and rapidly develop practical solutions using available resources. The betting markets throughout the galaxy were in chaos as odds shifted dramatically. The human, originally given essentially no chance of completing the challenge, was now favored to not just survive, but to be the only contestant to complete the full 5 days without assistance. More importantly, scientific institutions across the galaxy were beginning to question fundamental assumptions about what constituted evolutionary advancement. The most specialized species, those representing millions of years of evolutionary refinement toward perfect efficiency, were proving less capable than a species that had apparently evolved toward general adaptability rather than specific advantages. As night fell on the third day, Tom had established what could reasonably be called a sustainable settlement in the arena. He had reliable food sources, clean water, adequate shelter, and even basic tools made from materials found in the environment. He was not just surviving the challenge, he was demonstrating that the environment everyone else saw as barren was actually rich with opportunities for anyone who knew how to recognize and exploit them. The arena was revealing something about the nature of intelligence and survival that none of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had expected to discover. Dawn of the fourth day revealed a scene that had transformed the arena from a test of biological superiority into a case study of survival philosophy that was being analyzed by every major university in the galaxy. Only 4 contestants remained active, and the gulf between their conditions was so dramatic that emergency medical teams were on standby for multiple extractions. Tom began his day with what had become a routine that would have been impossible for any of the other species to replicate. He checked his various water collection systems, harvested mature seeds from plants he had been monitoring for days, and even tended to small areas where he had been encouraging the growth of particularly nutritious vegetation. The arena designers had unknowingly created conditions that favored exactly the type of survival strategy that humans had developed over millions of years of evolution. While other species had evolved specialized biological mechanisms for dealing with specific environmental challenges, humans had evolved the intelligence to modify their environment to meet their needs. Tom was not just finding food in the arena, he was actively improving the ecosystem to produce more food. His understanding of plant biology allowed him to recognize which areas could support better growth with minor modifications, which plants would benefit from being relocated to better conditions, and how to create small environmental changes that would improve resource availability over time. The three remaining alien contestants were in various states of crisis. Brix, the mighty Krillian, had awakened from hibernation to find his energy reserves at critically low levels. His species' survival strategy worked perfectly in environments where they could enter hibernation and simply wait for better conditions, but the arena challenge had a fixed time limit that made waiting impossible. The last surviving Voltari was facing a different but equally serious problem. Their energy absorption systems were designed for natural stellar radiation, and the artificial lighting was providing just enough energy to prevent immediate death, but not enough to maintain health. They were slowly starving in an environment that should have been perfect for their survival strategy. Most concerning was Kesek, the Drakmari representative whose species was considered the ultimate survival experts. Their biological systems were so advanced that they could extract energy from sources that other species could not even detect. However, their specialization had become their weakness. The arena contained trace nutrients, but not in the specific forms that their highly evolved digestive systems could process. Tom's activities were being studied in real time by teams of scientists who were trying to understand how he was accomplishing what appeared to be impossible. His methods were being documented and analyzed, revealing principles of survival that challenged fundamental assumptions about biological adaptation. The key insight that was emerging from the analysis was that Tom was not relying on any single survival mechanism. Instead, he was using intelligence to coordinate multiple simple strategies that worked together to create a sustainable system. He combined knowledge of plant biology, understanding of ecosystem interactions, basic chemistry for processing nutrients, and even psychological resilience to maintain morale and decision-making ability under stress. This integrated approach was proving superior to the highly specialized biological systems that had evolved in other species. While each alien contestant had one or two remarkable abilities that should have provided clear advantages, Tom was demonstrating dozens of smaller capabilities that supported each other to create overall superiority. The fourth day also brought the most dramatic development yet in terms of galactic understanding of human capabilities. Tom had created what could only be called a small laboratory within the arena, using stones, plant materials, and other resources to develop more efficient methods of processing nutrition and purifying water. His innovations were not technologically advanced, but they demonstrated a type of problem-solving intelligence that impressed even the most advanced species observing the challenge. He was not just using existing resources more efficiently, he was actually creating new capabilities by combining available materials in ways that none of the arena designers had anticipated. By midday, Tom had achieved something that stunned the scientific community. He was not just surviving in the arena, he was actually healthier than when he had entered. His intelligent resource management and understanding of nutrition had allowed him to maintain and even improve his physical condition using only materials that everyone else saw as worthless. This was being accomplished without any of the biological specializations that other species had developed over millions of years of evolution. Tom was demonstrating that intelligence itself could be a survival mechanism superior to any single biological adaptation. The observation decks were now filled with emergency conferences as institutions throughout the galaxy tried to understand the implications of what they were witnessing. If a supposedly primitive species could outperform the galaxy's most advanced life forms in a pure survival situation, what did that mean for their understanding of evolution, intelligence, and biological superiority? The betting markets had completely collapsed as odds shifted to reflect a reality that no one had predicted. Tom was not just likely to complete the challenge, he was demonstrating capabilities that suggested he could survive indefinitely in conditions that were defeating species with millions of years of specialized evolutionary development. More importantly, his methods were being analyzed and could potentially be adapted by other species. Tom was not just succeeding through unique human biology, he was succeeding through techniques that could be learned and applied by anyone with sufficient intelligence and training. As the fourth day progressed toward evening, medical teams finally had to extract Keswick, whose advanced biological systems had completely failed to adapt to the arena conditions. This left only Tom, Brix, and the last Voltari still active, with both alien contestants showing severe signs of stress, while Tom continued to thrive. The arena challenge was revealing that the galaxy's understanding of survival, adaptation, and biological superiority was fundamentally incomplete. The most specialized species were proving more vulnerable than the supposedly generalist humans, and intelligence was proving to be a more effective survival tool than any specific biological adaptation. As night fell on the fourth day, Tom was not just surviving the ultimate test of biological endurance, he was redefining what it meant to be successful in an unpredictable universe. His methods were being studied, documented, and analyzed by every major scientific institution in the galaxy as evidence that adaptability and intelligence might be more valuable than any amount of biological specialization. The final day would determine not just who won the survival challenge, but what the galaxy understood about the nature of evolutionary success. The fifth and final day began with an unprecedented situation that had transformed the survival challenge into the most significant scientific event in galactic history. Tom woke refreshed and healthy, having spent the night in a comfortable shelter he had constructed using advanced techniques that combined engineering principles with intimate knowledge of available materials. Around him, the arena had been transformed from a barren wasteland into what could only be described as a functioning ecosystem. His 4 days of intelligent resource management had not just sustained him, but had actually improved the environment's capacity to support life. Plants were thriving in areas where he had modified drainage and soil conditions. Water was being collected and purified through systems that required no technology beyond basic understanding of physics and chemistry. Brix, the last surviving alien contestant, was barely conscious. The mighty Krillion's energy reserves had finally reached critical levels, and his species' vaunted survival abilities were proving useless in an environment that required active resource acquisition rather than passive conservation. Medical teams were preparing for emergency extraction as his vital signs continued to decline. The morning brought delegations from hundreds of worlds as the implications of Tom's success spread throughout the galaxy. Scientific institutions, military organizations, and even economic councils were sending representatives to observe and analyze what was being called the most important demonstration of survival principles in recorded history. Tom, unaware of the galactic attention his success was generating, spent the morning refining techniques he had developed over the previous 4 days. He had created tools from stone and plant materials that allowed him to process nutrition more efficiently. He had developed preservation methods that could extend the life of his food supplies indefinitely. He had even begun cultivating plants in ways that would increase their nutritional content. Most remarkably, he had accomplished all of this using principles that could be taught to others. His success was not based on unique human biology, but on learned skills and intelligent application of universal principles. The techniques he was demonstrating could potentially be adapted by any species with sufficient intelligence and training. The scientific analysis being conducted in real time was revealing the fundamental flaw in the original challenge design. The arena had been created based on the assumption that biological specialization represented the highest form of evolutionary development. The most advanced species were those that had evolved specific adaptations that made them perfectly efficient in their native environments. However, the challenge had accidentally created conditions that favored exactly the opposite approach. The arena was a completely unfamiliar environment that required flexibility, creativity, and the ability to recognize and exploit unexpected opportunities. Species that had evolved toward perfect specialization were actually handicapped by their efficiency when faced with conditions outside their evolutionary experience. Tom represented a different evolutionary strategy entirely. Humans had not evolved to be perfectly efficient in any single environment, but had instead developed intelligence that allowed them to adapt rapidly to changing conditions. This adaptability was proving superior to any amount of biological specialization when faced with truly novel challenges. The morning brought the final extraction as Bricks finally succumbed to energy depletion. His removal left Tom as the sole contestant remaining active, but more importantly, it demonstrated the complete failure of specialized biological approaches in the face of environmental challenges that required active problem-solving rather than passive endurance. Tom spent the remainder of the challenge documenting his techniques for the scientific teams who would study them after the event concluded. He created detailed examples of his food processing methods, water purification systems, and environmental modification techniques. His documentation was clear enough that other species could potentially replicate his results given appropriate training. The final hours of the challenge brought the most significant realization yet about the implications of Tom's success. He had not just survived in an environment designed to be hostile to life. He had actually created a sustainable system that could support life indefinitely. His understanding of ecological principles had allowed him to turn a barren arena into a functioning ecosystem. This achievement was being analyzed by terraforming specialists who were beginning to understand that Tom's techniques could potentially be applied to planetary colonization efforts. His methods for identifying and exploiting hidden resources in hostile environments could revolutionize how species approached expansion into new territories. As the challenge officially ended, Tom emerged from the arena in better health than when he had entered. He had not just completed the survival test, he had redefined what survival meant. His success demonstrated that intelligence, adaptability, and understanding of universal principles could be more effective than millions of years of specialized evolutionary development. The post-challenge analysis revealed something that shocked the galactic scientific community. Tom's techniques were not uniquely human, but represented the application of intelligence to survival problems in ways that could potentially be learned by any sufficiently advanced species. His success was not due to superior biology, but to superior understanding of how to work with natural systems rather than against them. The Arena Challenge had been designed to prove the superiority of specialized biological adaptations. Instead, it had demonstrated that intelligence itself was the ultimate survival tool. Species that had evolved toward perfect efficiency in specific environments were actually less capable than those that had evolved toward general adaptability and problem-solving ability. The implications extended far beyond simple survival situations. Economic systems, military strategies, and even social organizations throughout the galaxy began reconsidering their approaches based on the principles that Tom had demonstrated. His success suggested that flexibility and adaptability were more valuable than efficiency and specialization in dealing with complex, changing environments. The arena was preserved as a monument to this new understanding, but its real legacy was the fundamental shift in how advanced civilizations viewed the relationship between intelligence and survival. Tom's victory had not just won a contest, it had revealed that the supposedly primitive human approach to survival through adaptability and intelligence was actually